in this tutorial, we're going to start focusing on adding some information to our building models. Now, some of you, if you've linked in your site model, if the information disappears, so what some of you might have done, for example, if you've gone and opened up, so if you go to BIM library projects, if you go to 300, I'm just going to open up the site model and explain what happens sometimes. Folder, site model, working files. Now, if you open up the site model, and so think of it this way, I'm going to close this version of Revit. So if this is a session of Revit that you're working with, if you open up a file, so for example, I've linked the site model and you can see it's a site model, it's telling me that. Now if you accidentally open up the site model in the same session of Revit that you've got the building model, so if these two projects linked together, for example, so if I go to File, Open, and I'll open that site model now. Just remember it's currently linked into this project. If I open the site model now, what it'll do, it'll give me a warning that there is a model linked in the current session, and it will warn you that it's going to unload or unlink. So it's actually unload. It will actually unload the model file from your building file. So yes, it'll open up the site model, just say ignore, continue opening. So now if I go to 3D view, and just remember, if you look at the top here, it'll tell me that's my building model and that's my site model. Now, if I go to 3D view over here, you'll find that all that information has disappeared. And if you go to manage, and I go to manage links, you'll see that it's no longer loaded, and it won't allow me to reload it because it's going to warn me that I've got it open. So just bear that in mind. So if information disappears, so if you're either working in the site model and your building disappears, it just means that you've got it open in the same session. To work around this, it's just a reminder, you need to open up Revit again. Okay, so you're going to start a new session of Revit. So in essence, you're going to have two sessions of Revit open at the same time. Then you can work on the project file simultaneously. But then you just got to keep saving the one file and making sure that you reload it every time. Just one thing to bear in mind, when you close the project file, it will always try and reload all the links once you relaunch the... So at the bottom here, I've got two sessions of Revit open. So if I open up the site model in this session and had the building open model in this session, it would work fine. So let me just close this, close window. Good. No. Good. So I just want to close this information quickly. So good. Now, so let's just close this session of Revit for now. Close that. I'm going to close my site model. So just remember, whatever model you got open, close that. It will close the site model. Now I can go to manage links and I can reload, and you'll see it will reload this information back in. Okay. So remember in our site model, we've cut a basement in. Now with your basement, you might have to make your basement the whole site, so maybe that's something that we might have to consider doing in this project very quickly. But for now, you should all have a building model as per mine, and you should have all the floor levels set up as per mine. You should have a section A, and B. And you see my site model showing where the... Okay, so if you're not seeing the mass, just please remember that you need to go to VG and you'll need to enable the mass function for all of them. I'll explain why Revit does this in a second when we start creating some contextual information. Okay, so if I just say shaded for now, you'll see that I can kind of see the mass in the distance. Okay, likewise with section AA. Now if I go to site, okay, here's my site. Remember I've linked, this is my site model that I'm seeing. So that's going to be, if you click on the section marker, it will tell you what section it is, or you can double click, it'll take you to the section, for example. Okay, so on site. So what we're going to do very quickly is we're going to add some quick information to this and start drafting. So we're going to draft some information, we're going to add some very basic information. Okay, I'm going to start with my section. In this section, so I'm going to get rid of all this information you see in the view. Okay, get rid of some detail line work, etc. So please set up your levels. The first thing that we might have to tackle, we might have two different types of structural grids. So your basement, so from basement down, so let's sort that out. One last thing to understand as well. When you're bringing in linked Revit links, you'll notice it brings in their levels and starts polluting your views. In order to fix that, if you go to VG, in the current view, go to Revit links, and if you click on by view, you can go to annotation objects and you can actually switch that off. So you need to go to custom, annotation, and you need to switch this off. So custom, switch it off. I don't want all that information coming in from my site model. Okay, so if you've built a whole lot of grids in your site model, you don't want that information polluting your building model. Basically, your site model is giving you your basement cut in essence. Okay, now we created a scope box for the first part of this video. Okay, so what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create multiple ones. So I'm going to select the current scope box that I created. I'm going to call this, I'm going to rename it, so you can give it a name. I'm going to call this concrete. Actually, leave it scope box 1. I'm going to call this extent. I'm going to create a new scope box. So go to site. I'm going to create a new scope box. So I'm going to go to view. And I'm going to make this, so think of it, your whole basement, remember your whole basement site includes all this information as well. So you could include all of that, but for now, for this exercise, I'm just going to include my building for the time being. This scope box, I'm going to call concrete. Concrete grid. Good. Because we're going to have 2 grid systems, so one for steel and timber, and then another one for your concrete base. So that's concrete. So if I go to section now with my concrete enabled, I'm going to move this down to the bottom here, just like this. Now, my concrete grid will work at the bottom. There will be overlap because you'll need to overlap so that you can use dimensions to coincide the two. Now what I can do is I can select all the grids in the project, so select all instances in view, in project, see it, and it'll cross all of them, and I can tell this, I'm going to assign this grid system to work with my concrete grid. Disassociate, because it was associated to something else. Now you'll notice I've got my concrete grid. So my concrete grid will work at the bottom here, and here I can use this icon. Now this does get quite interesting. If I click on grid and I go to edit type with switching them on, here you'll just have to spend a bit of time to customize the way they look. So when you select a grid line, you'll see it gives you this checkbox, and you can quickly change what needs to be visible. So maybe from the ground up you'll need to see them like this. You'll need to play with this a bit to get it to work better. Okay, so on the floor planes you want this to work correctly. Now what's interesting is because I've used a scope box for this, and I can pull this down a bit, okay, this you'll need to adjust down, so this I might pull down to here. I'll explain why. Now if I went to level 4 for example, you'll notice I'm not going to have any, so let me just change my extent. Just remember you're seeing the whole site. So in this instance, change your, so each view that you want to put in a sheet, remember you're going to have to adjust the crop region. So just remember this, and you're going to have working views just like we did with the site model. So I'm just going to focus on this bit for now. You'll notice that I can't see any grids on this view. But if I go back to my section, it just means that the scope box now is controlling my grids within the zone that I want it to work. I'm going to create a new scope box. So I'm going to go to my site plan now. I'm going to create another scope box, and you might just have to keep hovering over them to make sure which one does what. I can duplicate this. I'm going to copy, I'm going to paste the scope box, align to same place. This scope box 3, I'm going to call this timber grid. Good. I'm going to go to my section. Now I can select timber grid now, and I'm going to move this so my grid system for this timber structure will work within that zone. So here's my concrete grid system. Okay, here's going to be my timber grid system. Okay, I can go to any floor now and I can start creating a timber grid system. So I'm going to create a series of grids. Now you'll need to maybe give these a different name. So I'm just going to create, you'll see that it'll, whatever grid system we used last, it will recreate. And as you're creating a grid as well, as you're creating grids, you can automatically, you can start assigning these to a scope box, but we'll do that in a minute. So maybe what we'll need to do, this might have to become T for timber, control, timber, T1, for example, control T1. So what's great now is if I copy this, copy, we'll use our sections to start governing how this looks and works. I'm going to use my dimensions very quickly. So start using these tools, they're quite powerful. So if you want to edit a witness line and attach this witness line, I can use the equal command now to automatically equally space these as I adjust them to work. Okay, so you might find that your timber structure, and you can see T1, T3. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create another grid system. So I'm going to create another grid system. I'm going to go in this direction, and this will be TA. TA. And I'm going to copy this down as well. Copy. Now this will need to be adjusted to suit your, okay, now this might be TA, TB, okay, copy that a bit more. I'll create two more. So TDE, TE, and then TF. Good. I'll move this down to the bottom here, and then I'm going to use the dimension command. You can leave those dimensions attached for now, but you don't want them visible, so you might want to hide them. Okay, so these are going to equal as well. Equal. So this dimension might go in this direction. Okay, for now I'm just explaining how this works. So you can have T1, T3, so in that direction, then we just see what the spacing's like. Okay, so we might have to introduce some more, but for now, this is just an example to show how it works. So I'm going to go and grab all of these in the view. Because remember, our other grid system is currently not visible. Or technically that one shouldn't be, because that should be part of, so maybe let me just pull that part of, and that should be part of the concrete. So you can see if these things start getting a bit out of hand, you can fix them very quickly. Yes, disassociate it. I want that to work with concrete. Concrete grid. Disassociate. Okay, I'll just have to fix that in a minute. Okay, so let me just check. Let's go box 1. Timber. So that's go box is missing because it's lower. Okay, so I'll need to fix that in this section. That does happen from time to time, so just be aware of that. So I'm going to make sure that this grid line now works with. So this needs to be adjusted to this side. Now I'm going to grab this grid line and I'm going to say that needs to work with concrete. Good. Now if I go back to level 3 or level, what I can do is I can go right click and go select all instances in view, because these are the ones in view now, and you see they're not associated. I can say timber. Now you can see very quickly it's reassociated all of these to my timber grids. Okay, now if I go to section now, you're going to have two grid systems that are controlled by two different scope boxes. Okay, so this is quite powerful. Okay, just remember you might have to go and switch off the heads at the bottom, but it's done that automatically. So here I can go and control what I see, when and how. Okay, so that's actually very handy and powerful to understand. Okay, so for now I'm not going to spend too much time, so I can go DI. So what I can do now, I can maybe align these two together, so maybe these might have the same name. So maybe that's something that we might have to consider, but you can specify that these two equal each other, but there's going to be different spacing. sorry, in the wrong direction, so I'm going to go align. Okay, now if I go to my basement view, you'll notice I'm going to have one grid system available. You'll see that I have my first grid system available. Now if I go to my third floor now, I'll have a different grid system. So that's how you're going to manage a series of different grid systems. Okay, your elevations will work the same, but remember the grid system below ground you probably won't see. Remember our building's here in the middle. So our building's here in the middle. So you can see that the grid systems work, and that's what's nice about scope boxes. So that's the first part of the exercise. Getting your grid systems established, using your scope boxes correctly. Okay, now, once I've done that, the next step, and we're just going to create floors for this exercise. I'm going to go to VG, imported categories, and Revit links. I'm going to switch off my Revit file. Now, what's very important to understand by using masses. Remember, if your mass is not visible, you need to go to VG and you need to switch it on. Okay. If you're using the massing tool by default, if you start using the tool, it will always say show masses. So technically, this shouldn't show, and there's a reason why we don't show it. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to introduce some floors very quickly so that we've got some basic 3D information to use while we create some draft information based on our sections and elevations. For now, we're not going to model too much information because remember, you're at these early stages where you're busy planning how the building's going to work and you're busy working on your design. You don't want to commit to a lot of 3D elements right at this point because you might have to do a lot of rework and undo a whole lot of information. So get your planning right, get the information right. I'm just showing you a quick method on how you can start drafting the information, putting information in the right place, dealing with information, so while you start modeling information, things will start to connect. Okay, so in essence, I'm just going to use 3D floors just for the time being to illustrate this. So we're going to use a combination of 3D and 2D. Now, in Architectural tab, if you go to Floors, and you're going to say Floor by Face, now you'll see that your mass, because you've used the mass and you've assigned the floors to the mass, I can now quickly go and select all those floors in the mass very, very quickly. And what it'll do is it will create, so just like that, I'm going to go and assign the 255 concrete slab to those, create floor slab. Okay, good. Now you see it's created these floor slabs. That's great. Now the mass has pretty much done its job for the time being. So if you don't want to see it and you don't want it interfering, you can go to VG and you can go to mass. So all that's happening is the mass shape is driving the floor. So if the mass shape changes, the floors will give you an option to re-update and they will readjust to work with the cap. So what's great now is if I go to my sections, elevations, you'll find that it's populated all this information on my elevations and my sections, so section AA. So let's just go back to side view. For now, I would focus on, so let's go to site. Remember, this one is going to be, if I click on this, it'll tell me what section it is. So just click on the section. This will tell me section AA. So section AA. I'm going to focus on this information. Remember VG, I'm going to switch off my section markers for the time being. Annotation, sections, I don't want to see other sections in here for the time being. So what's happened is, it's created some draft elements for me. And you can see we've got a problem here. So here I'll need to start fixing the information. Let me just close that quickly. Okay. Now, by default, when you open up a view, it's going to be coarse. It might be scale 1 to 500. Just remember, set this to 1 to 200. Change this information to fine for the time being. And you want to switch on hidden lines. Now, you can see Revit is giving me it's giving me the 3D floors cut in section, but it's also giving me some information from a drafting perspective. And I can see here's my floor slab. Just remember, your ground floor slab is technically a surface bed. I'll get to that in a minute, so I've changed that. And this floor slab might be a lot thicker. Okay, so just remember that might have quite a large bearing on how things will work. But now, why do we want to draft a lot of information in the beginning? Because I'm going to pick a floor slab in here and I'm going to quickly explain what will start happening. So, your top floor or your roof slab, I can copy this up. Remember, it's associated to the mass, but if you copy it, it will become, so if I copy the slab, it will also become a new concrete floor, but it won't be associated to a level anymore. It just means now if I want to edit it, I'll have to change the boundary, but that's fine for now, because this is going to be my roof level in essence, or my roof slab for now. Okay, so I've got a series of slabs, so I need to start adding some quick draft information on here so I can start working at my building. So how do we go about doing that? So if you go to Insert and you go to Load Families, you can go and get some preliminary information, so detail line work. You can go and load some preliminary families that you can use to populate these screens with, or the sections and elevations with. Okay, so basically we're going to quickly go and find, so let's just go and find some useful information. So ceilings, those type of things. So we want to find some ductwork. I've given you a whole lot of families and I'll show how we start using those in a minute. Okay, but in essence, I'm looking for some useful information. So I'm actually looking for a ceiling makeup. And it's very, in the beginning, remember this is very basic in the beginning. You'll add a lot more detail later on. So it is hard to read these categories, I have noticed. So just try and maximize this as best as you can. So now we need to find, so leading, sheathing, and dry. So plasterboard, dry lining. So in this category, you'll see that it will start giving me some stud layers. So design, so necessarily looking for a ceiling board here. Gypsum, so find a ceiling board, let's find one that works well. So that's detail item, interior metal. So I'm just trying to find a good ceiling board. Sheathing, so this gypsum sheathing board, open that for now. I'm just going to load this up. Now it's going to ask me what type. For now, I'm going to use 15mm plasterboard. So you remember, you can. What's nice is you can load in. You can load in all of these, by the way. So you've got that option. But for now, I don't. I just want 15. I can go and reload this if I need to. Okay. So basically, in annotation tab. So there's two workflows we're going to quickly tackle. Now, typically, when you've got an edge of the building, in this instance, because it's a roof slab, you might have an upstand beam and a downstand beam. Okay, because it's early days and we haven't got used to the structural systems and how all of that works yet, there's a lot you still have to learn in order to use this effectively. What we're going to have to do in the beginning is just kind of draft your intentions out, so you don't waste a lot of time modeling unnecessary information. Okay, so how do we draft over this? Okay, so what you'll do in the beginning is, in the annotation tab, remember we're drafting over section AA now, you're going to go to regions. You're going to go to filled regions. Now, there are hatches set up to match what you're going to be working with in your view. So I'm going to go concrete hatch for now. Now, I'm going to start drafting over this edge here. I'm going to create an upstand beam and a downstand beam. Okay, so make sure that you match the line work with whatever you're drafting over. So 6 with concrete or structure. So if I start drafting an upstand beam here, so let's make this 255 for now. Remember, this is going to change, make that 300, come back down. Okay, now I'm going to draw through this object, come back through here, and close that there. Now, remember, switch off your line weight so you can see what you're doing. This is all going to be 6 concrete. I'll need to make that bit of line work invisible. Invisible. So this invisible line lives in here. You can use shift and you can use that icon. It will automatically navigate, so make that invisible line. It should go gray. Now if I go back to the line work and I press finish, you'll find now that it's created some drafting work, and this is a detail item. It's a filled region that I've drafted over this. Now you can see it's made an upstand beam, but maybe I'll need a downstand beam, so I need to go edit boundary. So what I might do is get rid of that. I can extend that bit of line work down because it'll match the edge of the slab. What I do like about this option is you can use annotation objects within this to kind of link things. So let's just go aligned. So you can use the level, for example, or you can use the top of the slab. So maybe I want to add, so here if I want to add another brick course to this, equals to, so equals to plus 75. That's quite handy. Okay. So I can do the same here. So let's create some line work. So go from there to there, back to there. Remember, this invisible line works there for a reason. Okay, this I can make a certain depth as well. What I do like, equals to 3 times 75, 85, just remember it's 85. Or equals to 4 times 85. Okay, 340. Now if I finish that, you would have noticed that it creates a filled region over this concrete 2D object. So it looks like I've got an upstand beam and a downstand beam. That's great. So maybe I want to copy this information, copy this down. But now I just want to edit this one. So I'm going to go edit boundary, and I'm simply going to go pull this down to there, and it should automatically close and snap. Okay, so now I've got a downstand beam. Now this filled regions, they need to be concrete hatch. Make sure that they're concrete hatch so that it matches the symbology of this hatch matches that hatch. That's important. Okay, so now I've got a downstand beam, so I can simply use the mirror tool now, mirror tool around there. And you see wherever these get located. Okay, so now I can move this information to here. Good, because I've got a downstand beam there. I can do the same thing over here. Copy this information from there to that edge there. And I can copy that edge, copy. And remember, you can make these groups. You can make these groups at any point. You can make them groups, which you can use down here. For now, I'm not going to go too in depth in making the groups. I think you're getting familiar with making groups. For now, I'm just going to create, what I might do is make a group per floor. Okay, so now I've got a series of downstand beams. Now I need to explore, maybe I want to put a ceiling line in here. So I'm going to go to annotate again. Now component. Now you can start using all of these detail components. Now remember, I've got this gypsum sheathing board. Now, if I start drawing, it creates, if I switch on. So what this does is it creates some line work. So here you can actually go and say, align that to that. And now I can grab this and draw it from there to there. So this could be ceiling boards. Okay, so I could take this right to the end. Okay, that's handy. So if I switch this back on, you see I've got some good information. Now, the next tool that I might want to show you, it will be create. So maybe in this instance, I might want to create a beam that sits in the distance. So maybe like a timber beam. Remember these floors might change to become timber. So whatever they become, whatever you draft, you can start adding in this view and using it correctly. So in essence, you can see very quickly, it's very easy to draft this information. Okay, maybe on this floor, I want that to be solid because I don't want to void in, or I want to create. So just remember, 3D floors, my top floor, and just remember, we're adding some information. I'm just going to get rid of this. Close that for now. Go back to section AA. Okay, you can see I've closed that void now, so now I can simply mirror. Now you can select a middle, or you can use this mirror command and you can select any point. Okay. Good. Very, very quick. So here I can go and select this information very quickly, and I can start kind of getting my intent across. Okay, so that might be closed. So maybe on this level over here, you can start adding some information. So maybe screed to full, you'll need to work that out, for example. So let me just illustrate how that would work. If I go to annotate and I go to filled region and I'm going to go to screed, they should screed. Now remember 6 concrete, so I'm going to say I want to pick that line there, that line there, that line there. Screed to full, so maybe we need to pick a high point in the middle. I'm just drafting for the time being, just so I've got some good information. Okay, now The screed will fall 1 to 80, so I'm going to draw 80 in this, so 80,000. I'm just showing you very quickly how you can make this work. So 1 and 80, and then 1,000. Sorry, let's do that again. Line 1,000 in this direction, 1,000, good. Now I'm going to draw a line in that direction. Snap in. I'm just getting the right angle. I'm still in the fill command, so this is something quite interesting to follow. Okay, so you're going to go and pick line weight 2 for now, and I'm going to move this bit of line work over here somewhere. Now, this is important to understand. I'm going to grab this line work from the end, so move this. So remember, it falls, and your screed thickness needs to be a minimum of 15 mil. So snap end. Now I'm going to go move 50. Okay, screed to fall. So what it's done is try to lock that align, so I'm going to go unjoin. But if I go section 8A and I switch off, so this 50 mil, okay, screed to fall. So now I can use my trim command, trim that line work with that, trim that with that, trim that. So let's trim these two, trim that with that bit of line work. So if I switch on line weights now, you'll see that I've got a thin line and a thick line, and I can mirror this line in that direction, mirror that around this point over here, and I can delete that now, and I can use my trim command. I'm just showing you very quickly how you can show screed to fall. Okay, switch this back on, trim. There's a lot more information that will need to go in here, but this is purely for drafting. Okay, good. So if I go and say, switch this back on, so now you can see I've put let's change this back to 1 to 100 for now, so we can see more detail. You can see I've got a screed on top of a concrete slab, and the line work is starting to work well. So that's quite interesting how we can do that. Okay. With your basement, you can draw in the basement walls very quickly, so maybe let's just have a quick look at that. Okay, so you've got all this information. You can start drafting how the edges work. You can start drafting how columns work, so maybe just add a column in quickly, masking. So this will be a masking region, so I'm going to do the same exercise. Rectangle, so a column will work from there to there. The column will be seen in the distance, so maybe make that line weight 3. For now, just remember, if it's uncategorized, it will just be line weight 3, so you don't have to specify what category exactly. And you can also now use this dimension tool from your grid line to maybe give these a certain width, so maybe 100. Do the same. Remember, it's a timber structure above here. You'll need to specify that width. Okay, now this is a masking region. What I do like about this, it will mask. So you can take this to the foreground. So if you say send forward, it'll hide that information in the background. We take this one, send forward. So we're drafting at the moment. When you start using proper families and proper beams and columns, this will start looking a lot better. Now I've got this column, which is great, and I can make this a component. So call this timber column 01. Just remember, you're going to have different types maybe. Now if I move this from there to there, now I can simply copy these or use the array tool. Totally up to you. Array tool automatically make them a group. So now you can see I can start using the structure quite effectively. So that's quite neat. Just remember, it's taken these to the front, so you might have to go back here. So if you want to see your seating line in front, and remember this becomes your service zone. Okay, interesting. Bring forward. Okay. Oh yeah, bring to front, so it'll be above everything. Bring to front. There we go. And these will sit at the back. So that's something you just got to bear in mind. But here you see I'm using basic drafting line work to kind of get an idea of how this should work. Now this is a masking region, so if I create the same one, so if I move this to this point over here, and I go to groups and I want to use it again, groups, timber column. Okay, so if I want to use this again, I can now use it on this floor, and you'll see it gives me that point on which to snap to every time. Just remember, if anything's going to change, you'll need to go to the type and you'll need to call this, make it a new type. So duplicate, I'm going to call this type 2. Type 2, press OK. Now if I go in here and edit and I change, so if I edit the width of this maybe and I'll make it slightly thinner, let's make that 100. Now move all this information to the center line. Okay, so now I've made type 2, so I can select this column and I can change it very quickly to type 2. And you'll see I can change them. So you might have different columns and different types depending on the use. Okay, so this is very easy to manage and start populating your sections. Okay, so I've given you a whole lot of families that you can use now. So if you, I'm just going to show you where those are. If I go to families, okay, so what's nice is you can start using some information here. So I'm going to say, let's say duct opening. I'm going to pull this into my view. Remember, this is 2D only. So here I can start placing some ducts. Okay, I can start putting in some people. So I can bring in some people. So grab and drop this in here, just like this. So now I can start putting in some information. So I can start putting my sections together and start getting a look and feel for how things work. Okay, so you can use the same technique for windows, you name it. Okay, but now also detail line work, I can start saying, well, just make sure that you use the right categories so that you can switch things on and off and select things very quickly. So windows maybe, now I can start drawing. So basically I can start drafting some very basic information in here. Okay, I can start drawing some windows, I can start putting in some ducts, I can start putting in some of this information. Okay, so I can quickly generate a section with some rich information using some drafting elements. Okay, this applies to floor plans. Okay, I'll get to the floor plans in a minute and I'll show you how to use that information as well. Okay, so this is my section. I've put in some columns, I've put some downstand beams, I've put in some ceiling boards. Okay, now what I'll do very quickly is I'm going to fix the concrete basement and show you very quickly how that will work. So I'm going to go and say fold region again. I'm going to quickly create a concrete. So basically I'm going to just start drawing lines. So I'm going to say from there down to, okay, now we're going to take it a bit further and I'll explain. We're going to make this 600. So type in 600. You can have an angle at 45 degrees. That's fine for now. I can snap this back to there and I can draw back up and I can go right to the top just like this. Okay, good. Now, this dimension I can now get from the bottom here. So this might be in brick courses, or I can make it 300 for now. Okay, you'll see it'll start adjusting this information. Remember, this will need to become invisible lines. Quick invisible lines. You just need to bear in mind where your slab works. So section A, this is from front to back, so this will work like this in essence. You might have to split up this line work here in the middle. Split it up there, there, and there. These will need to become invisible lines. Remember, if you're drafting everything, this can become one bit of line work. Okay. Invisible lines. Okay, so now change that to concrete, because remember hatch, concrete hatch, it'll hide. So very quickly I can start populating how this works without having to put too much information into this file, unnecessary 3D modeling information at this point, because I'm still busy trying to work out what I need to do. Okay, you can see very quickly what I can do now is put a DPM around, so we're going to focus on the basement for now. And again, I can use these as my columns and I can duplicate this, copy this down. Remember, the columns in the basement might have a different grid. This is just very hypothetical for now. Okay, remember this is a problem now because this will need to become a concrete column. So here you might need to go to edit type, duplicate. So I'm duplicating it. So now I can go to edit type. Remember the floor to floor height might be different in here. So that I can change its width. So edit type. Here I can maybe make this a 300 column and tab everything, and I can move this to the middle, to the column. Good. Now I can use these concrete ones down in the basement, and we might have a thickening in the slab here, so I can grab this information, copy this, copy. What I like about this, you'll see the magic starts happening now once you know how this all works. Edit boundary. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mirror this information, mirror around this middle point over here, just like that, and use the trim command, trim. Just remember and modify, it's this trim command over here that I'm using. Get rid of that, get rid of that. Now we can get rid of all the other information, just like this, and I can say finish. Okay, now these will work together because technically there might be a ground beam here, for example. Okay, now that I've started to establish this information, I can make these a group. I can make this a complete group. This didn't quite move to the middle, that's strange. Move this from there to there. Okay, now I can grab this information and copy it. Copy. Okay, so now these would be ground beams, for example. Now the last thing we need to do is to start adding some information around my basement. Remember, as you start modeling your basement, adding more detail in, you can start getting rid of the detail art and stuff. But for now, just to establish what you need to do, just to kind of draft, use your ducts. So here you're going to put your ducts in here. So just before, while we're working everything out, I can put this information in there. So I can go align that to there, align that to there. I've got a duct here, for example, so maybe this downstand beam might have to get thicker, for example, or it might have to come down even more. Create similar. You can use this command to create similar, so maybe here I'll need to put this within the safe zone, so here I can draw in this direction. So that's my, if I go to, then this one will need to stop over here. So we're using 2D line work very quickly to kind of give us a bit of a guideline of what's going on here. Just remember this will need to move down a fraction because it was within that safe zone. That one was fine, so then I can just pull this across just like that. Okay, you can see very quickly I've factored in that beam maybe. So there's a duct there, for example. I've got my basement. Now in detail line work, annotate. Detail line work, I can go and add my DPM. So if I go here and I go DPC, what I like about Revit now is I can add in, I'm going to make this quite a high offset for now, and I'm going to start drawing around the end, spacebar to change the direction, so I can start adding in my DPM layer, damp proof course. Okay, so I've got lots of videos explaining how to do this, but I think for tomorrow I just want you guys to start adding this information to your building models and start exploring these techniques, because you're going to need to add a lot of this information in here to start delivering the next phase of work. Okay, so that will stop over here. Good, you can see I've got my DPM, I've got these floor to floor zones. I can start adding in some dimensions, so annotate, I can start adding some linear dimensions for all the grid lines. So I can start adding in some rich information. I'm just going to stop there for now. Okay, there's a lot that you need to do. You can start using some text. Okay, so that's quite neat. Okay, now if you are drafting objects in here, what you can do is if you create a reference plane, architecture reference plane, and I draw a reference plane in here if I need some help drafting information. If I go to my basement, you'll notice that that reference plane will start showing on my basement. So if I go to basement 1 or 2, here's this reference plane over here. You can give it a name. So if you want to draft walls in here, you can use reference planes to start kind of coinciding with your section so that you know where things are going, in essence. Okay. But for tomorrow's exercise, I want you all to start drafting your sections. Remember, your elevations work the same way, so this whole exactly the same workflow you can apply to your sections. Okay, I mean to your elevations, so you can start drafting elevations. I've got some other workflows that we'll start tackling. But for tomorrow, I want you guys to set up your grids. I want you to start understanding how you're going to preliminary draft all this information, get your structure kind of set up, drafted, so that you know how everything is going to work. Okay. All right. One last thing that we're going to do very quickly is in view, in drafting view. I'm just going to show you. I'm going to create a drafting view. I'm going to make this 1 to 100. And I'm going to quickly, I'm going to leave a drafting view by the name. This is just where you're going to dump information. For 2D information, you know, you can see what it looks like and you can use it. Okay, so I'm going to open up that families. So I've given you, I'm going to give you a link to these families. Okay, so these families, I'm going to give you a link to these files, and I'll show you where you're going to go and access this information and start dragging this information in here. So I'm going to go and grab all this information. So right from here to the top, so Control A, I'm going to unselect that, so unselect the drawing file, Control A, Control to unselect that. I want all this information now. So simply I can drag and drop that in. So I'm going to put this in here and drag and drop it into my drafting view. So what it'll do is it will load all of these families into the project. You're going to give it a couple seconds. Okay, so once it's loaded into the project, I'm going to go to Insert, Architecture, Annotate, Component. Now I can start adding in, so air handling unit, and you'll see each family will have 2 types, and that's just the type of font. It comes with the label. So I've put in my air handling unit. There's my air handling unit. So I've taken all the services drawings that you were given in AutoCAD. So let me open that file very quickly. I've gone and recreated all of these files for you in this project file. So you can start dragging and dropping them in here. Detail component, they've all been named accordingly. So a cat ladder, for example, and you notice they come in with labels. Now that text does work in some instances, but if it doesn't, there's a type associated to it that you can switch down. It'll be no label, it'll have no text. Okay, and it'll have 2 sizes of text as well. Okay, it's a cold water tank, my apologies. So that also has 2 labels. You can see how the labels change. So I've gone and built all of those little families that Aubrey's given you. I've actually built all of them in Revit for you, so you can start using them in your basement. But for now, what I'll do is I'll start dumping all this information in this view. Okay, a quick way to do this is if you go to your families. So this is another way to do it. If you go to families and you go to detail items. Okay, so metric detail items. Here you're going to see all of those, so you can go to duct, for example. Now you can pull in, I want an 800 duct. So remember, I can draw the duct, for example. Duct bend, I can introduce a duct bend. Okay, so I can introduce a duct bend for you. So that's interesting, so you guys can start, so align that to that. Voila, and align that to that. This will just have to be 1,000, I think. That'll be 1,000 to work with that one, for example. I've got so floor drain. So let's pull in a floor drain. You're going to put in a floor drain maybe here in the corner. Okay, so here I've given you all of those fire hose reel cabinets. So here you can pull in all of this information in this drafting view. You can test things out. So drafting view is quite handy to see how things work, test them. Then when you need to use them in your basement, for example, you can grab all this information just like this. Control C, go to your basement view, basement 1 or 2. Now you can start pasting this information in here and then using this information in the view correctly. Remember, these are going to be at a certain scale. You're going to draft a lot of information in the beginning, and remember, if you don't want to see the labels, you can simply switch off the labels. Okay, then you can draft around this. For now, I just want you to set up your views correctly, rework your information that you were given, try and draft what you need, because we're going to start working on 3D objects, so we're going to start creating walls and all that information shortly. Okay, but in essence, you can see very quickly, you can populate all of these views with your drafting information very quickly. Okay, so please focus on getting your grid set up quickly and start drafting what is required.